She grabbed the handle of my wheelchair and pulled it backward. I was sitting in it. That's where this story ends up. Let me back up. My name is Marcus. I'm 34 years old. 6 years ago, I was a construction site supervisor. Then an accident took most of the function in my legs, and everything changed. I retrained, passed my certification exams, built a client list. Now I'm a licensed AD compliance consultant. Companies, theaters, restaurants, public venues, they pay me to make sure their accessible spaces meet federal standards. I know the law, every inch of it. And I want to be clear about something before I get into this story. When people hear how it ends, when they get to the part where I pull out my card, they sometimes assume I was just sitting there waiting to deploy some professional credential like a weapon. I wasn't. I was there to watch a movie. I just happened to have spent 6 years developing a very specific set of skills, and those skills are occasionally relevant in the wild. It was a Saturday in November, about 2:45 in the afternoon, the Westfield Cineplex on Harbor Boulevard, 12 screens, stadium seating. I was there for the new action sequel that had just dropped. I'd bought my ticket online 3 days earlier, selected my seat, paid $16.50 like everyone else. The accessible seating row at this theater is row D, back edge of the main floor before the stadium steps start. Wider spacing, no fixed seats in the open spots, companion seats right next to each wheelchair space. I rolled in at 2:50 for the 3 o'clock showing, screen 7. The theater was maybe 60% full. I found my spot, D7, the space I'd reserved, pulled in, locked my chair, and started scrolling through my phone. My buddy Terrell was running late, so his companion seat next to me was empty. Those 10 minutes before she showed up were good minutes. Popcorn smell. Climate-controlled air. The trivia slides on screen that nobody gets fully right, but everybody tries. I had a large Diet Coke in my armrest cup holder, and I was reading about the film's director. It was exactly the kind of ordinary afternoon I needed that week. Quiet. Mine. Then I heard her. A double stroller, one of those wide tank-like ones, ramming into the back of a seat 2 rows up. Then a woman's voice, sharp and carrying. "Excuse me, can everyone just move?" She came down the aisle pushing that stroller. 2 kids in it, maybe 1 and 3 years old. Behind her was a man I assumed was her husband, carrying a massive bag of popcorn and looking at his shoes like he'd been practicing that move for years. The woman was somewhere in her mid-30s Lululemon jacket, and she had the specific expression of someone who had never once been told no and had built an entire personality around that fact. She stopped next to me, looked at my wheelchair space, looked at me, looked at the stroller, and she said, "We need this spot for the stroller." Not, "Excuse me," not, "Sorry to bother you," just, "We need this spot." I looked up from my phone. "This is my reserved accessible seat. I booked it online." She tilted her head like I'd said something in a foreign language. "Right, but we have a stroller. There's nowhere else to put it." "There are other spots in this row," I said. I pointed left, where another open wheelchair space sat empty. "That one's available." She looked at it. "That's too far from the center." I just looked at her. "This is my seat. I reserved it." And that was the end of the reasonable portion of our interaction. She straightened up and took a big breath through her nose. "Look, I have 2 small children, a baby and a toddler. You're one person. This stroller needs more space than you do, and honestly, it would be easier for everyone if you just scooted over." Scooted over. I'm in a 300-pound power wheelchair. "I can't scoot over," I said. "I'm in a wheelchair, and I reserved this specific spot." "Well, they shouldn't let people reserve these if they're going to be difficult about it." I kept my voice even. "I'm not being difficult. This is my designated accessible space under the ADA. I'm not moving." She stared at me. Then she turned to her husband. "Can you believe this?" He said nothing. Kept looking at the floor. Honestly, I almost felt bad for the guy. She turned back to me. "My children have just as much right to be here as you do." "They do," I agreed. "Which is why I'm not asking you to leave. I'm just not giving up my reserved seat." That's when she shifted tactics. She got louder, not yelling yet, but that projection voice. The one designed to recruit an audience. "So you're going to sit there and ruin our family outing because you won't be accommodating for 2 minutes?" People in the nearby seats started looking. A teenage girl in row E turned all the way around. 2 guys in their 20s a few spots down were watching, with that particular alert expression of people who sense drama incoming. An older woman in row C pulled out her phone. "I'm not ruining anything," I said, still calm. "I have a ticket for this spot. Your stroller is not a wheelchair and doesn't qualify for this designated space." "That's incredibly selfish," she announced, loud enough that it was a performance for the room, not just a comment to me. "There's a baby here, a baby, and you won't give up one little space." The teenager in row E muttered something to her friend. I caught the word seriously, and it didn't sound like agreement. The husband finally spoke. He put his hand on her arm and said quietly, "Babe, maybe we should just—" She pulled her arm away. "No, this is ridiculous." She looked around the row and spotted a man sitting in a regular seat about 4 spots down. No mobility device, just someone who'd booked in row D. She turned to him. "Would you be willing to switch? If he moved down there, this space would open up." The man blinked. "I don't really want to move my seat either." "Of course not," she muttered. I kept my face neutral. I was already running through what I'd need to document if this went where I thought it was going. She pulled out her phone and started typing. I figured she was venting to a friend. Fine. I put my phone away and waited for Terrell. That's when a theater employee appeared at the top of the aisle. Young guy, maybe 22, wearing the red vest. His name tag said Kobe. She had flagged the staff. He came down the aisle with the careful energy of someone who already knows the next 5 minutes are going to be awkward. Kobe looked at me, then at her, then at the stroller. "Hi, is there a problem here?" She jumped in immediately. "Yes. This man is refusing to accommodate my family even though I've asked him politely multiple times. We just need this one spot and he won't move." Kobe looked at me. "Sir, do you have a reservation for this seat?" "Ticket confirmation, seat D7, 3 o'clock showing," I said. "Booked online. This is my accessible space." "His wheelchair fits anywhere," she cut in. "A stroller is also an accommodation." Kobe looked pained but held his ground. "Ma'am, these spaces are designated for mobility device users. Strollers don't qualify under our seating policy." "That's discrimination against families," she said. Kobe blinked. "I don't think that's what discrimination means." I want to give Kobe credit here, because that was the right call delivered with the right tone. He wasn't dismissive. He wasn't condescending. He was just correct, and he said so plainly. A lot of people in his position, 22 years old, red vest, $9 an hour authority, would have caved in the first 30 seconds, just to make the noise stop. He didn't. I made a mental note. "I want to speak to your manager." He nodded slowly, like he'd seen this coming from 3 miles away, and went back up the aisle. The woman turned to me with a satisfied look, like she'd just played her best card. "We'll get this sorted out." "Okay," I said. Her husband sat down in the companion seat next to me. Terrell's seat. I didn't say anything about it yet. The toddler in the stroller had started fussing. The baby was asleep, completely indifferent to the entire production happening around her. The husband stared straight ahead at the trivia slides. He knew this was wrong. I could tell just from his posture. He'd calculated the cost of saying so and decided the number was too high. That's its own kind of exhausting, and I don't envy it. The manager came down about 6 minutes later. "Name tag," said Deanna. "Mid-40s, calm. The kind of manager who has dealt with every variety of customer complaint and stopped being rattled by any of it." Kobe trailed behind her. Diana looked at the setup. Me in my chair, the woman with the stroller, the husband in Terrell's seat, and read the room in about 2 seconds. The woman launched into it again. Same story. Asked him politely, he refused. "Families have rights, my children deserve to enjoy this movie." She finished with, "If this theater can't accommodate a family with a stroller, I'm going to report it to the city." Diana looked at me. "Sir, do you have your ticket?" I pulled it up on my phone. Ticket confirmation, seat D7, 3 o'clock, accessible space. She looked at it and nodded. "Ma'am," Diana said, "this patron has a valid reservation for this designated accessible seat. Strollers are not classified as mobility devices under our policy or under federal law. I can show you to the other available space in this row, or we can find you seats in a different section." "I don't want a different section. I want this spot." "I understand," Diana said. "In that voice, that means I hear you and nothing else. But I can't ask this patron to give up his accessible space." That's when things went sideways. The woman stepped forward, 1 step, directly toward me, and grabbed the handle at the back of my wheelchair. The push handle. And she pulled. Not hard enough to move me. My chair was locked and weighs 300 pounds, but she grabbed it and pulled with clear intention. Everyone in the surrounding seats went quiet. I'm going to be honest about what that moment felt like, because I think people imagine it must have been terrifying or humiliating or enraging. It wasn't any of those things. It was clarifying. There's a particular stillness that comes over me when a situation resolves into something I understand completely, when the ambiguity is gone and what's left is just a set of facts. She had physically contacted my wheelchair while I was in it. That was the fact. Everything after that was just process. Diana said, "Ma'am, do not touch his chair." I looked over my shoulder at her hand and said, clearly, "Take your hand off my wheelchair." She let go, but she didn't step back. "I'm just showing him how easy it would be to move." "You just physically contacted a person's mobility device while they were in it," I said. "That's assault in most jurisdictions. It's also a violation of ADA regulations regarding interference with mobility aids." She actually laughed, nervous and dismissive at the same time. "Oh, please, don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic, I'm being accurate." She rolled her eyes and turned to Diana. "Are you going to let him talk to me like that?" Diana said, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back from his chair." She stepped back, one step, arms crossed, jaw tight. I reached into the bag on the side of my chair, pulled out my wallet, pulled out my card. I held it out to Diana. The card is clean, white background, blue logo. It says, Marcus B., ADA Compliance Consultant, Certified Accessibility Inspector, Licensed Litigation Support Specialist, my firm's name, my direct line. Diana looked at the card. Then she looked up at me. Something shifted behind her eyes. "I've done 3 accessibility audits in the past 2 years for theater chains," I said. "One of them was a Westfield property. I know your chain's ADA compliance documentation, your required accessible seat ratios, and I know what the Department of Justice considers an interference with accessibility rights." I wasn't saying it to threaten Diana. She clearly knew what she was doing. I was saying it loud enough for the room to hear, for the woman to hear. Diana straightened up and looked at the woman with an entirely different expression. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to either take the available space down the row or relocate to a different part of the theater. This space is taken." The woman looked at my card, back at me, her mouth opened, then closed. "You work for the government?" "I work for myself," I said. "I consult for both private businesses and federal agencies. I've served as an expert witness in 3 ADA litigation cases in the past 4 years." Silence. The teenage girl in row E had her phone up. I clocked it. The older woman in row C said, audibly, "Oh, wow." One of the 2 guys a few seats down started clapping. Slow, deliberate. 3 or 4 claps. His friend immediately joined in. The woman's face went through about 6 expressions in 4 seconds. Embarrassment. Anger. The calculation of whether to keep pushing. Her husband stood up from Terrell's seat. He picked up the popcorn bag. He said, "Let's just go find different seats, okay?" For a second I thought she was going to argue with him too. Then she grabbed the stroller handle and pulled it back up the aisle without another word, head down, moving fast. Her husband followed, and on his way out he looked back at me over his shoulder and mouthed, "Sorry." It looked like a real one. I gave him a nod. Diana watched them go, then she turned back to me and handed me my card. "I'm sorry that happened, Mr. Webb. I want you to know this theater takes accessible seating very seriously." "I know," I said. "Your compliance documentation is actually pretty solid. This was a patron issue, not a venue issue." She nodded. "Let me see what I can do for you," and she went back up the aisle. Before he followed her, Kobe lingered at the end of the row for a second. He looked like he wanted to say something and wasn't sure if he should. Finally, he said, "For what it's worth, I looked it up when she first came to get me. The stroller thing. I knew she was wrong before I even came down." "You handled it right," I told him. "You stayed calm, you knew the policy, and you got your manager when it escalated. That's exactly the protocol." He nodded, looked almost relieved, and headed back up the aisle. Terrell showed up 3 minutes later, slightly out of breath, carrying 2 drinks. He dropped into the companion's seat, looked at my face, and said, "What did I miss?" A lot, I said. I gave him the short version. He sat there with his drink halfway to his mouth, just shaking his head. She grabbed your actual chair. Yep. And then you showed her the card. Yep. He grinned. I hate that I missed it. Diana came back before the previews started. She handed me 2 vouchers, good for any future showing, any seat, any time. Then she said, "The manager on duty next Saturday is named Renee. If you ever have a concern about accessible seating here, ask for her by name. She'll take care of you." I appreciate that, I said. The lights went down. The movie was actually pretty good. But that's not the end of it. About a week later, I was doing my normal routine, checking my professional review profiles. I do it partly for client visibility and partly because clients sometimes pre-check my background before hiring. I have profiles on 2 industry platforms and 1 general business review site. There was a new review on the general site, 1 star. The username was something like Harbor Mom of 2. It said, "Rude and aggressive, refused to help a family with small children, used his disability as an excuse to be difficult. Would not recommend this person for any professional service." I sat with that for a minute. Honestly, my first reaction wasn't anger. It was this tired, hollow kind of amusement. She'd gone home, put her kids to bed, opened her laptop, and decided that the right response to a Saturday she hadn't controlled was to try to damage a stranger's livelihood. That takes a particular kind of commitment to being wrong. I almost respected the effort. Almost. Then I wrote my response, factual, dated, detailed. I noted the date, the theater, the time. I stated that the reviewer had approached me in a public space, demanded I vacate a reserved accessible seat for a stroller, escalated verbally when declined, involved theater management, and physically contacted my wheelchair while I was in it. I noted that accessible spaces are protected under federal law, and that interfering with a mobility aid is a recognized form of disability discrimination. I noted that theater management sided with me, and that I received comp vouchers as a written acknowledgement. Professional tone throughout. 0 sarcasm. I also added, if this reviewer is the individual involved in the November 12th incident at Westfield Cineplex, I want to note that I did not pursue any formal complaint following the event, as theater staff resolved the situation appropriately. This review, however, is a false characterization of events and constitutes a defamatory statement about my professional conduct, which I am documenting. Within 48 hours, Harbor Mom of 2's review was flagged and removed by the platform for violating their terms of service on defamatory content. That same week, I got 4 new 5-star reviews from actual clients. 2 of them mentioned hearing about me through a situation at a movie theater, which meant the teenager in row E had apparently posted something. I never found the post, but the clients found me. And then, completely out of nowhere, I got a message on my business profile from the Westfield Cineplex corporate accessibility team. Their on-site manager had told them about the incident. They asked if I'd be interested in doing a staff training consultation on accessible patron protocols. We're currently negotiating the contract. 4 locations, starting in January. I think about that woman sometimes, not with anger. More with this flat, tired feeling. She had 2 small kids, a husband who looked like he'd been apologizing for her for years, and she spent her Saturday trying to bully a wheelchair user out of his legally reserved spot. When it turned around on her, she went home and wrote a fake review. I don't know what happened in her life that made her that way. I don't actually care. What I care about is that every theater employee who watched that situation play out now has a clearer picture of how to handle it. Kobe did everything right. Diana did everything right. And the chain is now paying me to make sure the staff at 4 other locations can do the same. So she accidentally did me a favor. Terrell says I should send her a thank you card. I told him that was mean. He said it was actually kind of nice when you think about it. I'm still deciding. The vouchers Diana gave me are still in my bag. I'm saving them for something worth the trip. There's a documentary coming out in February about accessibility architecture in major cities. Bridges, transit hubs, the whole thing. Deeply niche. Terrell will probably hate it. I'm going to ask him anyway. He'll say yes, he always does. So would you have handled that situation differently? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how other people would have played it.